Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to OSW Daily, where each day we discuss the work-related trends with leading experts and thought leaders in the industry. I'm your host. My name is Steve Todd. I'm Global Head of Workplace at NASDAQ and the founder of opensourcedworkplace.com. Today, what are we going to talk about? Well, today I have Mark Gilbreath, who is the CEO of LiquidSpace, with us. So what are we going to talk with Mark about? Well, as we're in the middle of December, coming towards the middle of December in 2020, we want to look back over 2020 for the co-working industry. What a turbulent year it has been. And as we look ahead towards 2021, potentially this is probably the market segment with the biggest upside, given everything that we've seen. So I really want to understand and see what Mark thinks about that. But what are the risks? What are the challenges? And then also, what are the predictions that he may have on co-working in 2021? So let me welcome Mark back to OSW Daily. Mark, how are you doing, sir? Great to have you.
Hey, buddy. Happy holidays.
Yeah, man, great. Happy holidays to you, man. It just seems so strange. We were talking just before we got on camera about, we've both put up our Christmas trees and we're both starting to feel that festive spirit, but work just keeps going at the moment. It's really hard to sort of get our heads around that it is that time of year, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And in a 9-month period where life and work have blended and workplace and home have blended, and you throw in a holiday and all of the logistics and stresses that come with that. It's just this giant stew or soup of activities and priorities. The personal management aspect of life is taken on sort of new complexities, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And Mark, I'm really bad at sort of jumping into topics because I get to know all our guests and I get to know them intimately. But for those who are coming across the channel for the first time, Mark Gilbreath, CEO of LiquidSpace, what do people need to know about you and LiquidSpace?
I live in Idaho. I
Idaho.
used to. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, which is the a little ski town at 6,000 feet in the mountains of Idaho. It's where the chairlift was invented, believe it or not.
Wow.
It won Ski Magazine's #1 ski area of the Western U.S. in the most recent poll. And I used to hide that fact because when I started Liquid Space, when Reid Hoffman and some other investors put the first dollars in 9 years ago, if you weren't like 30 or younger and in the Bay Area and you were trying to raise venture capital, you had to sort of address that topic. you know, like, you're 40, not 30. You don't live in the Bay Area. Oh, you're building a distributed team. You're building a distributed team product that's about flexibility and choice. Oh, like all that stuff you wanted to hide a little bit. And so, but how things have changed, right? Now I
Right.
can sort of now everybody from Silicon Valley and Seattle and London and New York are moving to towns like Park City and Sun Valley, Idaho, and other places because they've got choice. So anyway, yeah, there's your fun factor today. I live in a mountain town. One other fun fact: I got 9 bicycles. I really like biking, and so in the garage
Nine.
to my right are 9 hooks on the wall, and so.
Nine. Nice. I have four. I have four and a half. One is half bike that I kind of use for parts and so on and so forth to transfer between different
Yeah,
bikes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you know what it's like, and
The
two are
donor.
stationary, and two are
Yeah.
stationary.
Yeah.
But no,
Hey, are
I
you
love.
on, Steve? Do you use Zwift or any of the
Oh
other sort
yeah,
of? All...
yeah.
Oh,
I
all
love
right.
Swift. I love Swift. It's brilliant. And what I find though is the biggest challenge on Swift is keeping up because it is just full throttle to the metal. You know, it's just all go. But I love it. The experience is phenomenal. You go on in the weekend and there's like 20,000 people on it. It's just like phenomenal. It's I love it. But we should connect on there. But but yeah, so we're talking about co-working. We're talking about 2020, Mark. You know, and I sort of look at myself through 2020, and I look at our industry. I look at whatever we looked at. I talked about, in March, April, May, the perception of what co-working may or may not be, how
Yeah.
the pandemic may affect it, and there was grim. There was a lot of concern. We were really unsure what's actually going to happen. So, I mean, you running what you run, how did you look at that? And sort of what's that journey been like for you and the industry as a whole through 2020?
Well, I'd like to think that I was an early optimist. I mean, there's that Mark Twain quote that the news of my death has been greatly exaggerated. And so there's been just so much fucking news on one end. Oh, the office is dead, the home is dead, co-working is dead. I mean, there's a lot of puffery and it's not fake news, but it's just a lot of just low effort speculative media, like just crap that flows out there that doesn't really delve deeply into the topics. And certainly LinkedIn and the channels have been occupied with that sort of puffery, I'd say. But I'd like to think that I was fairly early optimistic about what I think we're now seeing to be the true outlook for flexible office, which is it's gonna accelerate. We're gonna have a phase shift. It's this long arc of trends toward employee autonomy and flexibility and choice and productivity in the workplace and economic efficiency and assets and sustainability and hiring and retention. Like so many of those factors that like various people in various roles within companies have tried to solve for, they've all sort of collided together. It's like we've got this giant atom smasher, and this beast of a phenomena, COVID, has brought a lot. It's like a bunch of mirrors that have focused a lot of these activities toward this one white hot center now. And workplace, I believe, is right now, in like it's at Mach speed, in terms of preparing for what's going to be a very different other side of this pandemic. So we'll get more into that. But I think co-working's under stress, but it absolutely is going to have a massive acceleration. There's no question about it.
And you mentioned stress. Do you still still feel that stress in the industry, or do you think there's more optimism?
Well, I do. Like I just hosted a conference the last 2 days. The Global Workspace Association had a conference, and in the opening remarks, I threw this slide up, and I said, like, we're living in a multiverse. If you're a sci-fi buff, right? It's like there's two realities happening at the same time. One of those realities is one of abundance. Like we're seeing the market, the customers we want to serve, the partners that we need to side. We the industry are seeing the market opportunity, the embrace, the effectively the latent TAM, like the quivering sort of pregnant TAM, radically larger than it was just 9 months ago. Like the scale of the commerce that is going to happen based upon the demonstrable actions and declarations of myriad of companies, it all points to, it's going to be bigger. At the very same time, that's one universe, a universe of opportunity, a universe that says, hit the gas pedal, hire, scale, tool up your marketing, build more spaces, right? The other universe that is happening at the very same time is a crushing recession. The flexible office economy is in a crushing recession right now. We're nowhere, the real commerce happening on a daily basis. People booking offices by the hour, by the day, by the month. Transacting and utilizing co-working space. It's still hugely attenuated from where it was in January, and that's just really, it's fascinating, but it's fucking tricky as hell too. Because what does it mean that we're in a recession? It means that revenues flowing into these space operators are not they're a fraction of what they were. And are they going to rebound? Absolutely. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening right now, or need to be happening, inside of those operators. How do we stay alive for the, it's like you're sitting on your surfboard and like the water's flat, but you can see that wave of the day. Like you've got suddenly you've got 300x vision. You can see that wave of the day. It's coming. Like, oh my God, oh my God, the perfect, and there's no one else on the break. Like here I am, I'm on the board. Like the perfect wave is coming. Like I can see it, but it's it's coming in super slow mo. Like you can see it. It's coming. And so as operators, like my heart goes out to them. That's a challenging situation.
Yeah.
And then you got landlords and asset owners that are all day long they're having workout conversations with their tenants, and some of their tenants are co-working space operators, and they've got to read between the lines and make the smart calls and recognize that flexible office partner or tenant is absolutely part of their asset stack that they've got to hold on to. So there's all sorts of creative things happening on that front too. But it's a multiverse. It's really confusing.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. And as you think about it, right, so as the CEO of Liquid Space, who is a marketplace for all these co-working, what things are burning in your head right now? Right? What are the challenges that you see What's keeping you up at night as you think about, because you want to help these guys because in essence, that's your business model, right? So
Yeah.
what's sort of going through your head at the moment?
Um, it's a nervous tension. I mean, I suppose the biggest burning question um, that there isn't yet data for, but there is a clear hypothesis. But the question is, hopefully you'll relate to this, Steve, as a global head of workplace. How will the newly emancipated, the newly freed employee actually behave? Like the Nasdaq employee, the AT&T employee, the Salesforce.com employee, the Twitter, the Atlassian, all of these employees of all of these companies who have signaled that they will be providing more flexibility and choice, or even outright autonomy to where their employees choose to work. How will they actually behave?
Hmm.
Where do they actually live now? when they emerge from their home or their temporary home or the Airbnb that they've been staying in Sun Valley, Idaho, like are they gonna what some of them, many of them are going to click back into the old rhythm of January. I don't think the majority.
Right.
Some of them will have moved and they haven't even disclosed that to their employers yet. And as they reemerge, they're going to be creating new demand signals in markets that have been underserved or will suddenly be underserved, right? But just how is that ideal customer? Because that's one of our constituents. Like, how are they actually, like, where are they and how are they going to act? Like, we're
Right.
we're, you know, we're seeing initial signal coming in, but with the slip back in COVID here in the States, at least, it's still largely suppressed. And so I say it's a nervous uh, anxiety because with the work that we're doing with large enterprises who are, setting up our platform to provide flexibility and choice to thousands of employees, like we can see the scale of what's coming at us in the weeks and single digit months ahead. How will the animals, the natives, actually act and behave? Where will they choose? Will they be working 3 days a week at home and 2 days a week at the office, or a day a week at a co-working space or at a hub? Like all that, that's going to be a really exciting reveal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And we've talked in the past, and we looked through 2020, and we talked about how people are migrating from city centers to suburbia. A lot of
yeah.
the larger co-working companies have actually, they built out large infrastructures in those big cities. Have you seen a migration or alternative strategies that they're rolling out in or plan to roll out in 2021?
Um, um, we've already seen the data on how secondary markets, suburban markets, tertiary markets are faring better. We've seen the demand data that's stronger there. We know we have line of sight to the level of occupancy and activity for the co-working space and serviced offices in those markets. So we already know that hypothesis is bearing out. We already know that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of I could name several co-working operators, for example, that happen to have been slightly better positioned already, who are sort of smartly declaring and say, hey, look, we're the XYZ in all of these markets where the market's going. So they're reminding customers that they're already in the places that you might want to go to. I don't know. I would tend to assume that few operators have had the capital and the mind space to be able to, in the last 9 months or 6 months, sort of actively change and restart their development pipelines. There's a good bit of lead time to. I mean, part of what's tricky for an IWG or a WeWork or an Industrious or others is it's there's a fair bit of capital and there's a lot of logistics planning to go in and site select, contract, design, and build out a co-working space. It's no less
Mm-hmm.
complex than building out a dedicated traditional leased office.
Yeah.
So given that, I think one of the other interesting things that's happening is, and that we had a panel on this at the GWA conference yesterday. There are some non-traditional players, asset owners, operator types that are kind of sticking their head up and saying, might we have a play here? One of the most fascinating ones in my mind is Marriott. I mean, Marriott is now experimenting with guest rooms as workspace. You and I think have talked about this a little
Right.
bit,
Right.
but they've got two toes in right now, and it's interesting because if it works for them, I mean, they're not a. I mean, they're becoming more innovative and experimental. Like the pandemic is inducing innovation. It's demanding experimentation, but they don't do things lightly. I mean, that's not to say that they've made a commitment that this is going to be their future, but I think they wouldn't be experimenting if they didn't have a receptivity to following through if it works. And they've got 22,000 locations around the world. They're 8 times bigger than Regis.
Right. No, no, and trust me, as someone who wants to provide workplace for employees, and conversations I've had with leadership or people across other organizations, what's our viewpoint going to a Marriott or going to a suburban co-working location that we have no insight into who they are, who operates it, what their standards are. You go to someone like a Marriott, that's very appealing. We know what the environment is, the fact that you can go into a room, you have your own restroom, they have the facilities, they can provide all these other amenities. I think is tremendous, and I think it's I'm excited to see what they do. I really hope they do get into the space, and as I said, the more choice we have, I think the better it is for the co-working industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think well said.
Yeah. So whenever we think about the risks, and we think we're optimistic about what we think and what we believe the flexible workspace could be in the future, what do you think are the key risks? I mean beyond the obvious, beyond the pandemic and so on and so forth. What are the real risks for those operators beyond the pandemic?
Yeah. Do you want to approach that from the vantage point of a investor considering putting $1 behind them,
well, I'm happy to go that way. And I'm also happy to go from a user experience, right? Because the product, I think, does need to shift, and that's where my sentiment is. But I appreciate your perspective and asking the question differently. So I'm happy to go both ways.
Look, I'll follow your lead. I mean, for the user, and the operator has a burden of care over the user's risks, right?
Right.
The operator has to be mindful of them. The operator's a product provider. The product's got to serve the customer ideally well, economically. It's got to delight them. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be sustainable. So a huge risk right now is this remaining uncertainty around health and safety. Now, we've got this wonderful light at the end of the tunnel, finally, with 3+ vaccines that are either in distribution or in pipe. And so suddenly, look, space operators and employees and workplace leaders and managers who are caring for those employees, we can all hopefully take a little bit of a breath and a reset and start to actually do our material planning. Because look, I now believe, while the date of safe reentry isn't certain yet, is it May 3rd? Is it July 27th? Is it October 15th? Look, it's somewhere in that range, right? Mm. Like certainly by this time next year, we won't be living under this crushing recession that we are, or rather there won't be the health and safety concern of stepping outside of my apartment or my house. That'll be gone. That's going to be great. So in the near term, the next 2 or 3 quarters, a huge risk that the provider of space has to be massively indexed to is the well-being of the customer, and the fact that the fear of that topic, or the angst around that, is one of the huge pieces of friction in their customer coming back. So that's a tricky one. It's also a really tricky one from a business operation standpoint, in that, like, you could go whole hog on health and safety and like redesign your space and put in all sorts of touchless technology and signage and new types of furnishings and new layouts and put up walls. Like, there's a lot of capital that you could get sucked into spending, and there's a lot of capital that, God damn it, the establishment has been sort of trying to get you to procure. And I think the tricky thing is we might find ourselves in 12 months with all that being all well and good, but no longer needed. So that's, what's the useful life of the health and safety investments that are being put in place? That's an open question. The other bigger risk that I think is perhaps a little more secular, a little bit longer standing, is going to be, will the use cases that customers want to use, like NASDAQ employees who are walking into a co-working space on a community, are they going to be altered? Or will the white hot center of what they do in a co-working space be different enough that the space design and the environments, the typologies need to have shifted. I mean, there's a strong hypothesis right now that there's going to be more need for individual space for employees to come in and do a day of work near home. So that's a rhythm that COVID is presumably going to be accelerating. There's an additional complementary hypothesis that the other use case is going to be, 3 or 5 or 10 NASDAQ employees are going to come together on a given day at a location to do collaboration. Right. Well, what's the titration or the mixture going to be of those two activities, and is it 2-person collaboration, 4-person collaboration, 10-person scrums? Like what do those formats need to look like? Because if you were designing the next NASDAQ campus, you'd do all your surveys, you'd have a clear point of view on that. You would build your space program with a mixture that complemented all those things that you had surveyed. Right now, there's a lot of educated guessing going on, and whether it's redesigning for productivity and usefulness, or whether it is investing capital for health and safety, if you're an operator right now, you don't want to write big checks right now because your revenue is 40% of what it was in January. So,
yeah, and then no, and I buy into those risks, and I agree with you on when you talk about the design, and I sort of look to how NASDAQ employees may be using co-working space today, how they may be functioning, where they may be going, what activities are they going to do, and why are they selecting certain locations, what is the appeal of that, all so that I can then better design my internal workplace to attract them back to the NASDAQ office so that they are more integrated with other employees. I want to provide that flexibility, but at the same time, I want to attract them back to the office, right? So we build that community and we continue with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves.
And that's an interesting tension in itself too. Like there are some companies that have declared flexibility and choice for their employees and mean it. There are some companies that have declared that because their peer that they get compared with by Gartner in the Magic Quadrant has just done it, and they've got to do it also because they're trying to compete for the same employees. But maybe they don't mean it as much.
Right.
And maybe they didn't. Maybe they are still holding on to that old school presenteeism of I got to see Steve in this office to trust that he's going to do his work, or they're holding on to that old school notion of, well, I got to have this big gold plated brand logo on the outside of our building. Like, we're not going to be credible in the eyes of the market if we don't do that. And so I think there will be the interesting, one of the things we don't know is how leadership and management will react to and respond to what they learn over the next 6 quarters in terms of employees who've been given choice, because they are going to, as we re-enter, they are going to be working on the go more. This wave of choice is being given. How much of that is going to get pulled back? And when management tries to, certainly there's going to be instances where management tries to pull it back and or revoke it, and there will be little mini revolutions.
I actually think a lot of it comes back to the employee. How does the employee behave? How does the employee act? Yeah. Because if they act responsibly, if they act and take the initiative that they want this, so by choice they're choosing to turn up each day with purpose, deliver what's expected of them, then you get to keep the flexibility. I think if flexibility isn't there, well, then you're going to encourage your organization to ask those questions, to really go, are you more productive here, or do we need you in the office? So I think a lot of it, leadership will provide that flexibility as long as the results and productivity for the organization continue to improve, are sustainable. And I think a lot of that comes down to the individual employees.
Yeah, well said.
But so it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. And I'm fascinated. I love these psychological experiments. And I think this is what it is. And I think I agree with you. There are many organizations are responding to what competitors are saying, and that's a natural thing, because I do think that those who provide more flexibility will be able to attract better talent in the long term. We use the marketing thing. So as we look at 2021, right? You think of real estate space, you think of co-working. What excites you about it?
It's going to be massive. Look. for
The,
for
I love the excitement and just shrug of the shoulders. I love it, but
well, I'm trying to decide how sort of naked to get. Like for
mm,
9 years, we've been evangelizing. We've been building and scaling a business that has been serving, a an enthusiastic minority. We've been serving an enthusiastic minority that was exercising flexibility and choice, and the industry as a whole. The flexible office industry as a whole, as a percentage of workplace footprint, was like less than 3% of the built office landscape. And in the lead up to COVID, there were predictions by various folks, some data driven, some just speculative, but the predictions generally were that wow, we're headed toward 30% of workplace footprint being flexible, by 2030, by 2025, right? Um, we we on a panel yesterday we had Chris Kane, of Six Ideas, former head of workplace for BBC and for Disney. He was moderating an interesting panel, and he just came out and said I'd say he has some standing on that topic, given having run BBC and Disney Workplace. But he came out and said, I think it's going to be 50% in less than 5 years. Right. And so, but all voices seem to be around a massive acceleration. So like 2021, like that's the rubber hitting the road. Like even, so for 9 years, we've been like chipping away at this, swinging away at this, scaling a business, building a platform and an apparatus and a history of trust with property partners and refining our algorithms and all. And like I'm like quivering. It's like Christmas. Like I'm quivering with anticipation for when like the regulators get pulled off, like the speed governors get pulled off. And right now it's COVID. So
mm-hmm.
the fucking cool stuff that's going on right now is seeing these enterprises that had given short shrift to this topic for 9 years. They take the meetings, but did they really act? Did they really do a lot and really embrace it? No, now they are. Like the planning rhythms are in full swing right now. The staging for reentry, and for many organizations, reentry is beginning with flexibility and choice. Like many organizations are doing that at scale before they even fully reopen their campuses. And so, yeah, it's gonna be massive. The exact date and time of that relaxation is going to vary by submarket and by company, but I gotta get a lot of good sleep here for the next sort of month or two, because I think it's going to be just batshit crazy. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting, and I think it's going to be incredibly exciting.
No, that's great, and 50% is aggressive. I don't know if we'll
That's
get
a
to
big
fifty
number.
percent in
That's
five
a big
years.
number.
That's a
Yeah,
big
I
number,
agree.
but it'll be certainly interesting to um, see how we get there. And my brain's trying to do that calc. How do we get to that? How do you get to that? So it's like
Yeah, well, here's like a little bit of it might be sort of semantics. Dropbox has come out and said we're going to be a virtual first company, and they said what that means is that all individual work will be done at home, and then all of our traditional leased, designed and built offices will become what we call studio, and these will be spaces that are 100% shared, implicitly shared. So by that definition, like all of their workplace, all of their estate is now this flexible thing. It's all free address. Some of it they're buying by the drink, the space near the co-working space near home or the
hmm
collaboration meetup. But even their residual headquarters will be nothing like what they were 9 months ago. It's all a shared complex. Like if you want to throw that in and say that's a part of the flexible or the work from anywhere transformation that the industry is seeing, yeah, they would be an example of 100%.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, and I take that and I think of Dropbox and I walk through their San Francisco office. It's
yeah,
phenomenal. It's
yeah,
phenomenal,
it's cool.
and but I'd almost say 50-60% of that office is actually for people to get together and be together, to
Uh-huh.
have those collaborative conversations. And actually, the individual workspaces is only a fraction, and they're all on top of each other. The way they structure everything, they almost want to encourage people to get out and collaborate in the office. So I think it's a natural progression for
Yeah,
their culture.
yes.
But to your point, I think it'll be interesting, and that's how you, I guess, get that 50%.
Yeah, and I think so. Maybe the more important metric is what is the physicality of workplace and the policy of workplace going to be?
Mm.
And I think it will rocket forward to 50% or more autonomous. So that, the fabulous Dropbox headquarters, yes, it's a leased asset, right? But no longer will there be large chunks of it that are tied up with Steve Todd's name on the door, right? Or Drew Houston's name on the door. It's going to be an autonomous environment. It's going to be the policy of that workplace will be these are the shared commons, like and so I think so. Whether the underlying real estate business model is a long-term lease or a license agreement for an hour or a day or a month, what we do for part of workplace, I think I'll make my prediction. In 5 years, over 50% of workplace footprint will be autonomous. Does that make sense?
So, what does autonomous mean? Whenever you in that context,
whether I'm standing in a Dropbox, so if I'm standing inside the Dropbox, headquarters in San Francisco, I can. It's all a buffet for me. It's a palette of environments. I can tap in and use all of the real estate that's here. Mm-hmm. It's not cordoned off and isolated and dedicated to this person or this team. It becomes a broader shared environment. So a greater percentage of workplace becomes shared. As such, it becomes more democratic. It becomes more efficiently utilized. It becomes massively greener. So old model, sales exec has dedicated office, has conference room hanging off of that dedicated office that's used, 3% of the time, and no one else can touch it because it's his. Get the fuck away, right? Like old model, right? And assigned desks, assigned office, prescriptive workplace. New model, autonomous workplace, right? Policies put in place that say, all right, here are the tools and the mechanisms and the rights that you have, Mr. Employee, to navigate workplace, which is anywhere. Home, near home, and at these dedicated locations that we provide, these hubs. Some of these hubs we might lease, other of these spaces you might be booking by the hour, by the day, but you have choice and flexibility to navigate across all of that. I think that will be 50+% of workplace.
With that definition, I think 50% is conservative. That's my thought. I think organizations will be required to provide that autonomy that you're asking for. I think employees will demand it given what they have today. They have a desire to get back to the office, but they sort of also want to hang on to some of the flexibility that they've gained and got used to. But at the same time, they still want to have the ability to go in and meet up with colleagues. So I think 50% is conservative. I think the perspectives have shifted dramatically through this, I think from employees and from leadership. So it'll be really interesting to see where it goes. But yeah, so that's Mark. It's always great to chat with you. It's always good because my brain always gets a challenge to work. I work out in the morning, get some exercise in the morning, and I know your morning's a little bit earlier, so I always appreciate you coming on, and going live. So thank you, and I want to thank you for all you've done for Open Source Workplace this year. You've been fantastic. You've contributed. You've been part of the conversations, and I look forward to learning more from you in 21 and obviously continue these conversations. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a privilege, and 100% the same. I'm learning every time I chat with you, and now I know I get to see you on Zwift soon if Santa brings me one, which I'm hoping he does.
Okay, I hope Santa does, and we'll definitely see what we can do to help Santa do that. So yeah. So Mark, look, thank you. I appreciate it, folks. I'll put links to reach out to Mark. Please connect with him. Go to take a look at liquidspace.com. It's a great tool. And Mark, happy holidays, and we'll speak soon.
Stay well.